Welcome in here to this week's episode of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and on today's show, we're going to be taking you through the transfer portal. We're going to talk to you about all of the players that have entered, everyone who has committed to this point, and all of the impact that it's going to have on next season's college basketball standings, the rankings, what we discuss, the storylines that continue to develop as we move through the preseason into non-conference play. Of course, we will have conference schedules and then into next year's NCAA tournament. We're going to break down what these early days of the offseason can mean for that. Of course, the transfer portal has opened and closed. No new names can go in at the time that this is being recorded, of course, on Thursday. Yes, we could see one or two more names trickle in, just pop in because of the 48 hours compliance has to input that info, but not a ton of big names expected to enter at this point. Most of the big names have already been reported. It's been out there, the information on them. So that means we can kind of break down what the portal looks like. We're going to do that during this episode, but in the first segment, we're going to talk about this 5x5 rule from the NCAA because still up in the air, still out there being discussed. Will it take place and impact the 26-27 season? Will there be a grandfathering in of players who ran out of eligibility this season? You can see from the entries in the transfer portal that some players are, if not anticipating that, preparing themselves for the possibility. And it's dangerous for college basketball. We'll get into that here in the first segment. In the second segment, we're going to talk about some of the top commitments that we've seen in the transfer portal so far. We do have several of the top 10, even the top 25 players that entered the portal already committed to new schools, already set to join their new team. So we can break down some of the top recruiting classes, some of the top transfer classes at this point. We've got the ability to kind of see how different players are going to mesh, kind of hypothetically go through and talk about new rosters. We'll do that in the second segment. And in the third segment, we'll talk about the top players left on the board, the ones that your team is going to want to go out and get over these next few weeks, over the next couple of months for some of these, because as we know, the NBA draft process will play out. The NBA combine still coming up, and until post combine, these players are able to go through this process, get feedback, work out in front of teams, and then decide, do I want to go back to school? Do I want to keep my name in the NBA draft? So we're going to find out where a lot of players stand in the coming weeks and months as that continues to develop. But if your name's not in the portal, you can't get in anymore. But there is, if not a loophole, a concerning piece to all of this. And that's the potential for the 5x5 rule by the NCAA, which would say that, of course, all players, regardless of red shirts, medical issues, anything that has come up in the past, you would have 5 years of eligibility. You can play the full 5 years. You can, of course, redshirt one of those, but it's still going to count against your clock. You're not going to be able to postpone, go overseas, and then come in. No, from the time you turn the age of a high school graduate, you have 5 years. That clock starts ticking, and you have to run out your eligibility. Now, first of all, is the ability for the NCAA to even enforce this rule. As we've seen, eligibility has been challenged in court multiple times. You've seen junior college graduates or at least participants get extra years tacked on. We had the COVID year that was added. We've seen the way that retroactive red shirts have entered the game, depending on the situation and how many games the player was able to participate in. Injuries have been taken into account. All kinds of things have been grounds for either a waiver or a lawsuit against the NCAA, you get a preliminary injunction, and often from there, you are able to play that next season. We've seen it across sports. We've seen it in football, baseball, in basketball as well. And that, if anything, is where the model of college sports has been unsustainable. I know that a lot of coaches and athletic directors, even conference commissioners, like to talk about the money. The money is unsustainable. Well, that's just not true. We're seeing the value of rosters continue to increase, even as the NCAA has threatened and allegedly set a cap on how much these teams can spend. We're still hearing more and more about the dollar figures that these players are getting. And we know that to be true because they're skipping the NBA draft in ways that we have not seen in previous years. Clearly, there is a financial gain that they're going to be making. And so it's interesting the balance that we're finding here. Because if that financial model was unsustainable, we would see these numbers as the NCAA attempts to cap them come down. In addition to that, we're still seeing coaching salaries go up despite having to pay your roster. And so, how does that work? How are you able to, if player salaries are driving your revenue into the ground, support extensions, pay raises, buyouts for your head coach? Another interesting debate. Of course, it's drawn attention at Kentucky, where their outgoing athletic director will make $1 million for a job that still has not been defined. There's no real position that he's going to assume that has a tangible impact. Certainly not one that's worth $1 million a year. If Kentucky's athletic department is doing well enough to provide him that salary, then how is it unable to pay players? There's all kinds of inconsistencies here that have to be addressed as we move forward. But like I said, eligibility has been one that has been a stain. You're not really able to tell if a player is able to come back. We see some denied waivers that just honestly don't make sense. Everyone in the world thinks that this player deserves another season of college sports, and it gets denied, shut down immediately, cannot be challenged. But then we see one within the same time period that no one quite understands why they would ever get another year. And it's granted. So we've got to get consistency here. And I do think this is one area that the NCAA can potentially enforce something if they go about it the right way. Because eligibility, at least with an age cap, has been something that has actually gotten some support in the court before. It's one of the few areas they've ever been able to win these arguments. And so if they go to the 5x5, there will be challenges to it. Of course, we're going to see lawsuits, and that doesn't mean they're going to win all of those lawsuits. But I think more than anything, it will create a little bit more clarity. Because what they have created is, yes, 4 years of eligibility, but because they have given so many loopholes, provided so many pathways to that 5th year, to a 6th year, we've got 7th and 8th years. Because we have let those in slowly over time, 4 just isn't going to cut it. Because everyone knows that that 4 isn't real. So from here, going to the 5x5 seems like, if not a good solution, the logical next step. So for them to make this move, I think has gotten widespread support. The problem is that they want to enforce it, understandably, as soon as possible, because this has not been sustainable, the way that we're doing eligibility in each offseason. Where we run into an issue is if it is implemented and grandfathers in players. Well, that decision would be made after the transfer portal. And so you look at the amount of players that are now trapped on rosters. If all of the seniors from last year come back, Let's use Purdue, for example. You get Braden Smith back, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Oscar Clough. Of course, you would want to bring those guys back into the fold. Guys who have had sustained success, guys who have chemistry together. Fletcher Loyer would be part of that as well. Almost an entire starting five you could return to Purdue if this goes through and you're able to get another year. However, what's become an issue at that point is the rest of the roster. You see, Purdue would be over the 15-player cap that the NCAA has also imposed. So what happens to the bottom of the roster? Either Purdue has to release them without them being able to enter the transfer portal. They simply lose a scholarship, lose an opportunity for an education, or the NCAA has to then expand the rosters. Well, that's still not great for these players because at that point, they know they're not playing. You're 18th, 19th on the depth chart. There's no chance you're getting into the game. So where do those players go? Well, of course, the NCAA would probably be forced because in other cases, the seniors would not have a path back. They would have eligibility, but no space on the roster to come in and play another year. So what do we do with all those players who want to continue their college basketball careers? They would have to open up the transfer portal again. Well, part of the point to all of these eligibility changes is that they want to limit the amount that they're opening up the transfer portal. We've seen that. That's why we have the window. One window, 2 weeks. You get in if you want to be there. If you don't, you're stuck where you're at. So to make another rule change and actively make it a retroactive enforcement, then open up another portal window, it just reeks of every NCAA mistake, every NCAA head-scratching decision that they've made for years and years now. When the easy solution is to implement it moving forward, starting in the 26-27 calendar year. We go on the academic calendar in sports anyways. So enforce it for next season, and everyone knows the rules. That is the big issue in college. Nobody knows the rules. Whether we're talking about the money side of it, whether we're talking about the transfer portal, whether we're talking about eligibility, no one knows the rules at any given point. If you are to make this rule retroactive and grandfather people in, all you are doing is continuing that trend. It has to be pushed forward so that everyone can create a plan going forward, knowing the rules. So if you were going to implement this for this offseason, it had to be done before now. It had to be set in place long before we got to the transfer portal. And that's something that they could have met about and implemented. They chose not to. So it's something that you just simply cannot bring in this late in the game as teams are building out their rosters, many of them close to or already full. It just would not, it would create chaos all across college basketball. Unbelievable turnover that we everything bad, everything that people hate about college sports right now, it would all just be plastered across the news. Guys getting their scholarships taken, guys getting kicked out of rotations, guys missing out on opportunities, all of it. We would lose so many stories. And they don't have that opportunity the next level below them because those rosters are overcrowded too. There's nowhere to go if you just suddenly implement an extra year of eligibility right here and right now. Not to mention its impact on the NBA draft, which I know the NCAA doesn't directly care about, but is still an organization that they kind of work in tandem with. Don't forget that the NBA, if they feel like it, can create new rules that allow players to go straight to the NBA draft 1 year earlier, not have to go to college. That's up to them. They can negotiate that in their CBA. And if you go around destroying their pool of talent for the draft, why would they be making decisions that help you? Because I guarantee you, you look at the amount of seniors who are going to be drafted in the second round of this NBA draft, you pull all of them off the board, we run out of players in a hurry that are going to want to be in this year's NBA draft, and they've got to get to 60 picks. And those teams are not going to be happy when they look up at the board at 50 and there's no college players left. They have to go overseas. They have to just pick somebody to get their rights to hopefully trade later. You don't want to create frustration between you and professional leagues. I think that's what this is going to do if they are to try to retroactively apply this to any number of players. And that's just in basketball. Don't forget that across multiple other sports, this could have massive impacts as well. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about the actual transfers who are in the portal. We'll talk about the top committed players so far on the other side of this break, right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back in here on 3 True Values as we keep rolling through today's show. We're talking about the transfer portal, and now we're getting into the fun stuff from the portal. We've got the top committed players so far that we're going to be breaking down here, and we've got to start with the number one player in the portal according to On3's industry rankings. That's Flory Bidunga, who has already announced that he will be going from Kansas to Louisville. We're going to take a moment to talk about all of their commitments here. We're going to kind of just go through who they have to this point. Of course, Flory Bidunga is going to man the middle, comes from Kansas, where he had a big season this past year. I think more room for growth from him. His sophomore season at Kansas, he was much better than he was as a freshman. We saw him continue to make strides in the paint, to be able to continue working in the pick and roll, all the things that you need to keep developing to be the best big in college basketball. He's going to be in that conversation, certainly, with a handful of other guys that we'll talk about here in the next few minutes. But Bidunga was joined by Jackson Shelstad, a 2-for-1 for Louisville to really kickstart their transfer portal haul. So you get your point guard, you get your center. Those are two of the most important positions, as we know, in college basketball. So I thought it was a really big get for them to kind of establish themselves early, make sure that they got out in front of everything, and were able to add on both ends of the rotation. So Jackson Shelstad, who put up some big stats at Oregon over the last few years, he's joined by Flory Bidunga. Now you've got your pick and roll partnership set and ready to go. Of course, from there, they were able to add Carter Knox, a guy who has had some ups and downs. Last year was a down season for him at Arkansas, but we've seen the flashes. We know he can be really solid. I think he's better suited as a rotation player than trying to put the ball in his hands as one of the stars. I think that benefits him to be playing alongside Bidunga and Shelstad in that case. I think he's going to get a lot of off the ball reps at the 3, sometimes at the 4. We'll see. I like the fit. We'll see how he bounces back this season. And Alvaro Folgueras also in at Louisville, the power forward who made a huge shot for Iowa during their NCAA tournament run to knock off Florida. A guy who I think has some big potential. He can shoot it. He can stretch the floor at that 4 position. It's going to be interesting to see. I think he can play pretty well off of Flory Bidunga as the other big. He's still got size, but he's able to clear out that space for Shelstad, for Bidunga, as they get into different actions. We know Adrian Willie will be back for that Louisville team. He can stretch the floor as a guard, a wing position player who knocks down shots at a high rate, efficient basketball player. So really nice core there for Louisville to continue building around as they look to make it deep in the ACC picture, try to make a push towards that conference title. But they're going to have to go through Duke, who has already landed a few transfer portal additions of their own. We know that they want to focus primarily, if not exclusively in the past, on the recruiting cycle. They've done that again. They've got a bunch of 5-star talent on the way in the door. Of course, we know Deron Rippey, we know Cam Williams, Bryson Howard, all set to play for Duke next season. But they will be joined by John Blackwell, the number 2 player in the portal so far, a guy who comes from Wisconsin, efficient. He's 6'3", shooting guard. I think he's going to fit in really well here, provide them with some veteran punch, some just consistency in the scoring output. A guy who has averaged almost 20 points per game here in these last couple of seasons, has continued to ramp up his impact on winning, I think, as well over the last year or so. A guy who has big potential to be one of the All-American candidates next season. So a big pickup for Duke. And so is, I think, Drew Shanowski, who comes in from Belmont. Yes, a mid-major player making a big leap up in competition, but he's not going to be asked as a power forward with some decent size at 6'8". He's not going to be asked to come in here and be the star player. He'll play behind Cam Williams. He will be in the rotation as part of that second unit. And I think that he's got enough to his game. He's shown that during his time at the mid-major level. A top 50 guy in the transfer portal. So no scrub here. A guy who does project well to be able to make a leap up in competition and still make an impact. So if he's able to go out there and have an impact in that second unit, I think it's going to be a big boost for Duke as they continue to build out this roster. As we know, they got some returning talent as well. We know that Caden Boozer and Caleb Foster both going to return to that Duke lineup. Patrick Ngungba is also going to be back next season, manning the middle in that center position. Really like the core. There's still some other ones out there too. Isaiah Evans and Dame Sarr, no official decisions yet, but 2 guys that, depending on where they're told during the pre-draft process they could land, could definitely be back for the Blue Devils next season. Those would be some big time additions. It would really make this team not only super talented at the top end, but it would provide them so much depth in this unit. Really would be able to go too deep across the roster there. And I think that would be huge for the Blue Devils next season. We look down through the rest of the transfer portal entries to this point, and the next highest one that is committed right now is actually number 8, PJ Haggerty, headed to Texas A&M. Texas A&M brings in Haggerty, who's one of the top scorers in college basketball, has put up huge numbers over the last 2 seasons, an All-American effort at Memphis the year prior at Kansas State. That team, of course, as we know, had plenty of struggles along the way, did not live up to expectations, but he still put up big numbers in the scoring column. He's joined by Cade Phillips, who comes from Tennessee, a role player, if there ever was one. This is just a guy who's not going to put up big stats, but he's going to hustle. He's going to go out there, power forward again with some good size, going to be able to play. Played well at Tennessee for stretches. He dealt with an injury this year, and so wasn't out there on the floor consistently. It wasn't down the stretch. But early in the year, there was some more signs that he was continuing to develop, entering the starting lineup for the Volunteers alongside JP Estrella, so he can play with another big as long as that big can space the floor a little bit. I think that he's a good, solid pickup for this team. I think that he's going to perform well in that power forward slot. Lucas Wells transfers in from the mid-major level to this Texas A&M team. We'll see what impact he can have. He put up good stats, but at a lower level. And Jalen Reese going to come in, likely be a backup for this Texas A&M team. He comes in from LSU after entering the transfer portal. Also, it's not technically a transfer portal addition, so up in the air whether it belongs in this special, but we've talked about the rest of the roster for some of these other teams as well. So it is worth mentioning the commitment from Bryson Warren, who played in the G League for 2 different organizations, is coming back into college basketball. between his veteran experience, between what he's been able to do scoring the basketball alongside PJ Haggerty, that's going to be one of the top scoring backcourts in college basketball next season. No question about it. We'll see how the rest of the team is able to both keep up with that scoring pace and provide the defense necessary to hold the other team to a lower score. But right now, they've got a building block there. Buckyball is going to be in full force for Texas A&M next season. We're going to get to see a lot of high-flying, big scores from the Aggies over the course of at least next season. At number 9 in the transfer portal rankings and committed to Arizona State is Paulius Morauskas, follows his coach Randy Bennett, who makes the move from St. Mary's to Arizona State. This is an Arizona State team that is really being built almost from scratch. We've seen Dylan Shaw, another guy who is following from St. Mary's in there. They bring in Nate Garcia from a lower level. Emmanuel Inocente comes from Gonzaga, their rival school, going to head to Arizona State. They also get Joel Foxwell, a very highly touted mid-major point guard from Australia, originally played at Portland. Has put up some really good stats. There's a lot of analytics guys who believe that this guy is going to really take off when he plays at this next level. We'll get to see him in action. And Marcus Vaughn's, of course, transferring in from LSU as well. So they've got more to do building out that roster, but a solid start so far. Anytime you can get a top 10 player in the transfer portal, that's going to be big for fielding the rest of your roster moving forward. At number 10 in the rankings is Providence's Miles Byrd, comes in from San Diego State, and Providence under Brian Hodgson, another program that is building a roster almost completely from scratch. He comes in and he's going to get his guys. They also get another G League player we'll talk about here, Dink Pate, who provides some scoring punch, a really raw talent, still has a lot of potential, still plenty of people who are in on him as a guy who could develop and be a really good basketball player moving forward. He's got everything you need, size, athleticism. He's just got to work on that efficiency scoring the ball. I think taking a step down in level to college basketball could really benefit him in that. Get a little bit better shots against a little bit lower level of competition than what he's been facing. Give him that confidence, show him more of the fundamentals rather than kind of just trying to survive against older, more veteran players that he's been going up against in the G League. Go back to Miles Byrd, a guy who is one of the best perimeter defenders in college basketball, has been an all Mountain West defensive player for multiple seasons, averages big stock rates across the board, a guy who's gotten NBA draft interest in the second round for multiple years in a row now. Really has been on boards for at least 2 seasons as a guy who is very disruptive and really just needs to add that three-point shot to become one of the most valuable archetypes in the NBA. That guy who can lock down on defense, has good size on the wing, can guard up or down the lineup just a little bit. Maybe not a 5-position defender, probably can't handle bigs, traditionally bigs especially, but he can definitely step up and guard some guards. He can take on forwards who are on the perimeter for sure. Miles Byrd is a very interesting player moving forward. And that Providence team, look, they've got plenty of names coming in the door as well. Malik Mack, the most recent one coming from Georgetown. Arrington Page coming in, one of the bigs that they've been able to add alongside Samson Alaton. We'll see which one of those guys starts, which one comes off the bench for this unit. Ryan Sabal comes in from Buffalo, taking a leap up in competition. Devin Vanterpool follows his head coach from the American, of course, played against Brian Hodgson while he was at FAU, and the coach was at South Florida. Gavin Hightower played for Brian Hodgson at South Florida. That's what they've got so far. Again, more to come with them, more guys going to be brought into the fold over these next couple of weeks as they fill out that roster. But as we move to number 11 and David Punch, we talk about this Texas class. And I think that Sean Miller has really hit a home run so far in the transfer portal. One of the best classes that we've seen built to this point. I think they might be up there with the winners of the transfer portal. Obviously, it's going to be hard to knock off Louisville because they have the number one player already. You look at some of these other teams, but in terms of depth in this class, Texas is right there at the top. You get David Punch, who is a versatile power forward, going to provide you with a lot of defensive effort, also give you those hustle plays on offense, that dunker spot ability. He can also set screens, get into pick and rolls, a little bit of pick and pop. We'll see if that jumper can continue to develop. He's going to get to do that alongside Isaiah Johnson, who they bring in from Colorado, who starred in his freshman season, really took off. His ability to score the basketball was on full display. We'll see that translate here. He did it in the Big 12, and his stats continued to tick up throughout Big 12 play. I think that's a really encouraging sign for him to come in and take over this starting job for Texas. One of the reasons that he's one of the highest rated point guards in the transfer portal. Elijah Freeman, who came to Auburn last year with great fanfare, yes, came from a lower level, but had starred at that level, and everything appeared to translate. He had the size, he had the athleticism, he had the efficiency. Well, there were struggles at Auburn, but he was a bright spot for long stretches of that season. We'll see him come in to this Texas side now. Amari Allen, who was a solid role player at Tennessee, enters the mix here for Texas. I think he'll be good for them, likely off the bench this year. Could compete for a starting role, certainly. We'll see how that plays out, but I just really like the depth of what Texas has been able to create, what they've been able to add in the transfer portal to this point. Not a lot at all of teams with that amount of names that are proven at the high major level, the way that Texas was able to go get guys who had already done it. Don't have to worry about does it play at this level? How will it move up in rank? No, these guys have played in some of the top conferences in college basketball already. We'll look at Stephen Vox, the only commit through the transfer portal to Illinois right now. They don't need a lot. They've got a lot of returning talent. Another guy from overseas coming in to this team. I think he's going to have a big time season as a freshman, 6'7" shooting guard. So he's going to fit right in there. Illinois is going to get even bigger this season. You look at that spot in the rotation. Who was it occupied by? Well, Keaton Wagler, who was a jumbo point guard, shooting guard hybrid at 6'6". So this guy comes in at 6'7" and adds even more size to that roster. We'll see how that pays off for Illinois this season. I think that they're going to really continue to establish themselves at the top of the sport. Just a couple more teams that we're going to run through here, and we start with Indiana, who adds Aiden Sherrill, who adds Samet Yigatulu, who adds Marcus Burton. So, again, look at the last couple of seasons in college basketball. We've talked about this on the show repeatedly here recently. Size. You want multiple centers. You want centers with play styles that will complement each other. You look at Yigatuglu. He's had a little bit of facilitation during his time at SMU. He's really been a bruising guy in the post. Still more to unlock from him, I think, in the college game as well. Aiden Sherrill, what has he been able to do? Well, he's gotten bigger and stronger, more physical as a rebounder throughout this last year at Alabama. He still is a guy who his big intrigue coming into college was his potential to stretch the floor. He's shown flashes of it, not in large sample sizes, but he can stand at the top of the key. And if nothing else, give you the threat of a pick and pop. You're talking about two guys, 7-footers, who are going to be anchoring the middle of this team. Marcus Burton has been a huge scorer at the Power 5 level for multiple seasons now. He comes in from Notre Dame, crosses the rivalry lines, and I think is primed here with these two centers to have a monster season scoring the ball. I don't know if his scoring average can go up very much, but I'd be interested to see if it can, because look, he's going to get every opportunity to operate in pick and rolls for 40 minutes while he's out there. And he's surrounded by really solid role players all the way around. You look at Jaden Mustaf, a guy who averaged double figures for a Georgia Tech team last year. Darren Harris, who has been a solid, reliable option off the bench for Duke for multiple seasons. Bryce Lindsey, a guy who shoots the ball very well, above 40% last year for Villanova. They've got the core in place here of a really good rotation. Trent Sisley will be back as well after his freshman season. Saw him be not a big impact player, but he's a guy with size on the wing who was in the top 8 of Indiana's scorers last season. He returns, could take on maybe not an increased role in terms of minutes, but if his efficiency can go up, he can definitely have a bigger impact on winning. We'll see how that plays out for them. I think they're one of the biggest risers here in this transfer portal cycle. They've given themselves the ceiling to really get into the mix of a top 10 team in college basketball by the time the season comes around and we see how things fit. If it all clicks into place, they could be one of the best that we're talking about all season long. We now move to Miami, who I want to talk about here. Caden Lewis comes in to run the point, a guy coming in from Villanova after a standout freshman season. Thought was really good. And we see it again. What have we talked about with all of these top classes? You pair a point guard with a center. Somto Cyril comes in, very physical presence, big time athlete, muscular. He's going to rebound. He's going to set screens. And when you've got your point guard in place, that's going to be a huge help for this team that brings back Shelton Henderson, that brings back both Allens. There's a lot to like about where this Miami roster can head. Deshaun Good as well, a guy that has gotten interest from some big programs in the ACC at power forward. He comes in from Robert Morris. We'll see if he can make that leap up, if he can be an impact rotation player as well as this season rolls on. Just a couple more here. We'll just talk about these individual players who are committed. Nicholas Avdalis was in the draft process last year, ends up at Virginia Tech late in the cycle. Of course, the Greek international. He's got big potential. He just does. And running the point guard for a Michael Malone system, he's going to be a player that I'm watching all season long. He's a guy who could easily raise his stock up into the lottery conversation. It looked like early this year he might do that this season. Things kind of tailed off. That Virginia Tech team struggled. He kind of fell out of that picture, and he's going to try to build that stock back up over the next year. As we look down the board here at just a couple more of these players, we do have to talk about Donnie Freeman, who ends up at St. John's. Of course, big talk all offseason about his recruitment. The swing and a miss by Kentucky in the transfer portal. Yeah, they have not added as many players as their fan base would have liked at this point. They have Zoom Diallo at point guard. They have Alex Wilkins at the shooting guard, who the eye test really pops with that kid. He has potential in there. I know that some analytics people don't like him quite as much, but at 6'5", as a young player coming out of his freshman year at Furman, yes, I do value analytics, but you can't use them to determine everything that a player is going to become after his freshman season. So I think that was a very good pickup by this Kentucky team, but there's so much left to fill out on this roster. We'll see what they're able to fill it out with over the next coming days. Hopefully for them, they're able to land some of the players we're going to talk about here next as we break down the top available players in the transfer portal right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back in here as we wrap up today's show by bringing you the top available players in the transfer portal as we kind of keep rolling through the offseason here. Yes, this is a list that is ever changing. You never know when you're going to get a portal commitment that pops up. So if you listen to this later than Thursday when it comes out, it might have shifted a little bit, but we're going to give you more than just 1 or 2 players that are at the top of the board so that hopefully some of these recruitments will continue to push out. And even if they have committed, you'll have your breakdown of these players and what they're going to bring to whatever their new team is. The top available player at this point is Milan Momcilovic, the Iowa State transfer. Entered the portal. He is a guy going through the NBA draft process, has a real chance to be selected. This is a guy who shot right around 50% from the three-point line as a 6'8 power forward who played some small forward, really, if you look at how that lineup was distributed, him next to Joshua Jefferson. So, yeah, there's a lot to like about his game. Really translates well. I think that there's going to definitely be NBA teams that are interested. I think almost more interesting is what NBA teams give him in terms of feedback. If he does come back to the college game, what is it that he's working on? What is he going to be asking for? Because that's a lot of times what happens when you're in the transfer portal, you go through the draft process, you get this feedback, and it's not just about, well, you need another year. Particularly with Momcilovic, who is a junior, they're not going to just be telling him, hey, one more year and then we'll draft you. That's not really going to be what it comes down to. What they're going to want to hear is, hey, this is the area you need to improve. For some guys in the past, that's been, we need you to handle the ball better. We need you to work off the ball a little bit more. We need you to show that you can play in a too big system. There's been all kinds of feedback that you've gotten from different teams for different players over the years that have decided to go back to the college game, work on that by entering the transfer portal, and from there, then they choose a team that is willing to put them in that situation. So if you need to be on the ball, you go out to coaches and you say, who is willing to put me on the ball? If you need to play with another big, you go to coaches that already have a big on the roster and say, are you willing to run a too big system with me? If you're asked to stretch the floor more, are you willing to provide me with shooting coaches to give me the opportunity to take those shots, even though I haven't hit them in the past at a very high rate? These are the things that players are looking for a lot of times in the transfer portal, particularly those who are going through the pre-draft process. So for Momcilovic, not sure what, if anything, that would be, what the feedback he would get at this point would be from these NBA teams, but be very interesting to see. I think you can usually put together the pieces of what that feedback was from where they land after they exit the transfer portal. The next best available player right now in On3's industry rankings is Masamba Diop, a really interesting young center prospect. Of course, spent his freshman season at Arizona State, showed some real versatility there where he protected the rim. He showed some offensive pop, continuing to develop in just how well-rounded his game is. I think that's really the next step for him is, can he just clean things up? There's just some lulls, there's some gaps, some mistakes here and there. If you can clean those things up, what he provides in terms of being a rebounder, in terms of protecting the rim, and really being able to create fluid offense. He's not a guy who's just a stiff and going to catch the ball and doesn't really know what to do with it or only puts back dunks. There's none of that. Like, he's got some fluidity to his game that we're going to see how it continues to develop. He's got the size, of course, to be a really impactful center. He's a guy that I think a lot of people at the college level and the pro level are watching to see how he continues to develop his game over the next year here in college. Next best is Juke Harris, who took a massive leap forward at Wake Forest last year, went from a role player. If you listen to this show, we talked to Connor O'Neill, who covers that Wake Forest team, and he really was high on Juke Harris was going to take a massive leap forward. I had heard similar things that he had really started to take a leap forward, but to put up the production that he was able to on the wing for a team that really needed him to put up big time scoring numbers night in and night out, 6'7" and plays the shooting guard spot. Yes, he can be kind of a wing player who toggles between the 2, the 3, wherever you need him to be, but he's also got enough ball in hand ability to provide real intrigue here. And that's why he's been one of the most coveted players. We'll see how his NBA draft process goes if he chooses to continue down that road it's going to be interesting because he's got some big offers, it sounds like, from some top teams. As you see, the Tennessees, Michigans, North Carolina has been coming after him for quite a while now. Does he hold off those offers to continue this NBA draft process, or do they get high enough that he says, look, I'm just going to make more money by going this route regardless? Might as well take that path, get that money, develop my game even further, prove that I can put up those big numbers in a winning system for a top 25 team, and then make my next step to the NBA. That's going to be what's interesting to follow from Juke Harris. Tunde Yesufu, late entry to the portal from Baylor, one of the top scoring freshmen in college basketball. Look, this is a guy who puts the ball in the bucket. It's pretty simple. Tunde Yesufu, I still have a first round grade on him. I know that some people have kind of trended down on his game because it's a little bit bully ballish. He uses his strength at his size to kind of push around and get to his spots. Not super efficient basketball at this point because his 3-point shot hasn't really come around. I think if you bring that 3-point shot to a higher rate, yeah, I think his efficiency is going to go up quite a bit, but he is going to be probably a 20-point game per game score if he comes back to college basketball. So he enters late in the portal to keep his options open so that he can go through the draft process. And then again, get that feedback. If teams want him to be on the ball more, well, now he can go provide that feedback to different coaches. If it's something different that teams are looking for, yes, he can go find that correct system. He's not just trapped into a Baylor team that, yes, I think he would be given every opportunity. Scott Drew has produced some really good players throughout his time there, but you don't get to kind of negotiate your role if you're not in the transfer portal. So it'll be interesting to see what he does there if he comes back to college basketball. Next up, we have Allen Graves, who is the analytic darling of this class. His stock numbers are incredible. Everything that you look for in the analytics community is PER, box plus minus, win shares, all through the roof for Santa Clara last year. It's going to be interesting to see. He's going to go through the draft process, and I'm not convinced that he won't be this year's big riser. You're going to get some of these franchises that value analytics that look at him as a redshirt freshman and say, we would rather just get our hands on him now and be the ones who dictate what he becomes. We would rather be the ones who are working with him on his shot form, on his continued development against higher level competition. Look, Santa Clara is a program that has produced NBA talent. Jalen Williams, most recently for the Oklahoma City Thunder, another one of these guys who put up really solid numbers. Now, Jalen Williams put up bigger scoring numbers, but of course he was a wing on the ball, sometimes playing point guard for that group. Allen Graves, more of a power forward. So not going to be one-to-one, but he does a little bit of everything. He gave you enough rebounding to make you believe that's a plus trait. The scoring, of course, we'll see how that shot develops. Can he be a 3-point shooter? Because that would really add something to his game. I think that one of these analytics teams is going to really fall in love with him. We'll see how high they'll have to, if not promise him, then put him in the range of for him to stay in the NBA draft versus return to college for next season. My early guess would be that it would be somewhere right around 20, maybe a little bit before. You look in that range of the draft, there are multiple very analytics focused teams that are in that range. So if he can get, if not a guarantee, a very strong suggestion that he will be taken in that range, I think he's a guy who could end up like Cedric Coward last year, among others, entering the draft process, entering the portal, and then kind of deciding, look, I just can't pass this opportunity up. There's a team that wants to really invest in me in a serious way. We'll see how that plays out because I think he's going to have his pick really in college basketball if he does choose to come back. The last one we'll talk about here, the last available player from the top 25 at this point is Mustafa Cham. Recently took a visit to Michigan. This is a guy who has limitless potential at the center spot. Really high level rim protector. He's shown a lot of skill on the offensive end. It hasn't always come together fully on the offensive end, but if he can get with the right coaching staff, if he can get things to click into place there, he could be a big time center prospect. He's got the size at 7'1", the quickness, the hand eye, it's all there. It's just got to be refined, brought together in the right system. And I think that he could be primed for a huge season wherever he does land. So that kind of rounds us out here on the top available transfers in the portal. There, of course, are going to be plenty more guys who make a huge impact from further down the board. Plenty of guys who have already committed, who are going to be worth talking about through the offseason. We will continue to talk about them. We'll continue to talk about the news as it pops up, the latest transfer commitments here on 3 True Values. Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we will have some NBA draft coverage for you. We're going to talk you through some of the top prospects and what you need to know on 3 True Values Big Board. Thanks for tuning in here. We'll see you soon on the show.